And look at
Thanks for
that.
joining us, by the way, Chad.
Yeah, this is fantastic. This is
Oh,
fantastic.
we're live?
We are
I'm having
100%
trouble
live
already.
in the internets, live on our
Wow.
Facebook channel and our YouTube channel. And Daniel, you know this, but Chad just learned this. He is our very first guest in all
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Welcome,
First and
welcome,
last,
welcome.
possibly, depending on how this goes.
That's right. You're going to kind of set the pace for all other
That's
guests
right.
that we
That's right.
may
Now,
or may not ever have.
do we just sit here and wait like the annoying live people and just wait and count the views until we get to 10? I don't think so.
No,
We
we are
just
not.
dive right in and we go.
We are not annoying people. We're the good people for
So
sure.
Chad Heaton, Pastor Chad Heaton is a good friend of ours, and more of my friend.
Yeah,
I just gonna say.
let's be transparent here.
James and I are working on it.
That's right. We go way back about 10 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
And we met several years ago. We can talk about that. And I've been.
it's a cool story. You guys meeting.
Should we just share a little bit about
We
it?
can get right into it. Why not?
All right. Well, and let's talk a little bit about you, Chad, just before we get into how we know each other.
Sure.
So do you want to tell us a little bit? I know a little bit about you. You're pastor.
Yeah.
And you're a counselor.
I'm a pastor with the Christian and Missionary Alliance. I've been at Heritage Park Alliance Church for about 3.5 years. I grew up in a non-denominational, brethren-rooted church. That was the only church I ever really knew until I joined the Alliance. My former church folded during COVID. Kind of a wild story. They had a lot of assets, and one of the blessings as they folded, because it's not a fun process, was they blessed my current church with a big sum of money to develop the backyard so we could be more community-minded. So they're working on that right now, which is really cool.
Wow.
I'm married, going on 15 years to Margot Heaton. We've been together for about 20. I've got 3 sons, Elijah, Ezra, and Noah, and they are 11, 9, and 7. Woo. They all went up a year in April.
Wow.
Awesome.
And every year they get older.
They're all in April.
Every year they get older. They don't stop. That's right.
And you guys time that out well every time in April, eh?
We're both teachers by trade, so we're organized.
You're consistent. You have schedules.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now you wrestle?
So I call myself, my kids all think I'm like this wrestling legend. I'm not an amateur wrestler. I actually got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was a young adult, and I turned that into submission wrestling. So it's basically old school wrestling but you got to make the guy say uncle. You got to make him tap out. Right. So it's like amateur wrestling with submission holds. And I went as far as second place in the World Championships in about 8 years ago in Long Beach, California.
Wow.
It's one of my favorite things. I was a sponsored fighter in Windsor for a long time, and I got to wrestle and train with guys who were in the UFC. And 4 of the people there were about 10 of us back in the day that trained 5 nights a week together, and 4 of them went on to the UFC from Windsor. So
wow.
Yeah, I come from good stock here in Windsor as far as the MMA scene.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're like one of those tough masters, like a Mark Driscoll kind of like grounded down kind of thing.
Well, Chatham has a guy, Chad Laprise. He's your guy. He was in the UFC for a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I haven't heard.
And he's a Christian, from what I heard.
That's what I've heard. I don't know the man, but yeah.
Well, you don't all know each other.
No, yeah. Chatham's a little bit bigger than that. But
okay. I'm thinking of Harrow. Okay.
That's awesome. Well, both Daniel and I had a chance to come and visit your building about a month ago or so. Your building, your church building.
Yeah.
And
it's certainly not my building. I don't want the building. It's a lot to maintain.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I felt like I was like the country mouse coming to the big city.
It's a big building.
I was in like an airport terminal. Like that was a gorgeous facility. Yeah. Unbelievable. So yeah, you guys have really been blessed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself. Now, and your wife does counseling as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, so Margot, she worked for the public school board, GEC DSB. She spent about 20 years working there as a teacher. She started as a teacher, then a consultant, where she would work with groups of schools and teachers on their practice and building up their practice. And then she became a vice principal. Right. She's actually one of the youngest vice principals ever in the board, and she got her PhD. She's one of a few that got her PhD in education.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, she developed MS in 2019, and she hasn't been to work since.
Sorry to hear that.
Wow.
No, she's, God's been good to her, and it's changed the whole dynamic of our family, to be honest, in some ways for the better. She takes care of the home. She volunteers at our church, and we find, I don't know how up to date you guys are with the way the school boards are today, but Christians, their hands are tied in a lot of ways as far as living out their faith. And Margot has a lot more freedom to kind of bless our family and bless the people in our church community without having those hangups.
Good.
Wow.
Good.
Wow.
It's a good, safe way to put that too. That's
Yeah.
that's heavy. We've had some really good friends in our life as a family that have kind of walked with MS. It's
we're grateful because there's two main types: the progressive type, which you're devolving rather quickly until you pass, which is not good, and then you have the relapsing type, and she's currently the relapsing.
Okay.
And I asked the docs, I said, what brings you from relapsing? Is it possible to go from relapsing to progressive? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, what are the factors? And they said, stress is the number one factor.
Right.
And working at the school board today, especially through COVID, is super stressful. So she actually dodged all of that. So I'm grateful that she does have the health that she has.
Right. And you probably don't give her any stress at all.
Zero. Ask her. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into how we know you.
Sure.
I love this story. You probably love it in a different way. I guess it's weird to say I love this story because your grandma died.
Yeah.
And by the way, we do use a little humor, and that's
I'm humor gets. We were talking about my wife. You ask her. I swear, ask her right now. Say, why did you marry Chad? It's not, he has the biggest heart for God you've ever seen. It's because he's funny. That's what she tells people. He's funny, and looks fade. I guess humor's pretty important. That'll do.
That's right. That's right.
That's good. So Chad's grandma died, and I was working at a funeral home downtown Windsor, and your grandfather came in, big man, great big man, such a big soft heart.
Farmer.
Farmer, and such a cool guy. And he sat with me, and I could tell he probably didn't normally walk around, just shoulders slouched over, and you could tell he wore his grief so clearly, and he was so heartbroken. His wife of how many years? Do you know how many years they were married?
Over 60.
Wow. And over 60 years and she had just died. And so we sat together, we went through the funeral plans, and then after that he started asking me, because he found out quickly that I was a believer. I like to be open and transparent about my faith, even in my funeral services.
Yeah.
And then he goes, Daniel, like, how do you know where my wife is right now, according to the Bible? And now this is coming from a man. What's that?
That's an easy one.
Yeah, but he said don't use this scripture to be present, or to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Oh, he really got you. Eh?
Yeah, and he's a man who knows the word of God, and I know he knew the answers. He just wanted to hear them from me as well. It was like a reassurance. So we talked about the thief on the cross, and we talked about different things, and he's like, Daniel, describe to me what heaven might be like. I'm like, wow. And I was like, okay. And just, I'm like, from my knowledge, and I start describing different things about heaven. And he was just there to kind of soak it in. And I didn't have all the right answers, but I just was pouring out what I knew and just trying to help him out. Right.
Yeah.
And then, so we do the funeral, and that's the first time I met Chad, because they said, he goes, my grandson's going to be doing the funeral service. I said, that's great. He's becoming a pastor. That's awesome. So we got to meet each other and hit it off really well. And we're driving in the car to the cemetery. And I told him, I'm like, by the way, you're a pastor today. You sit in the front seat with me. And so he did. And we got to chat and get to know each other, which was really nice. And Chad knocked it out of the park, so much so that 2 weeks later, sadly, but not sadly in a spiritual way, his grandfather died.
Wow. Yeah, 2 weeks apart, and he was in full health.
Totally.
So when they say dying of a broken heart, I think that's a good example.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think that's a real thing. I've seen that
Yeah.
many times too, but that's heavy. Wow.
And I
Yeah,
totally
he
agree.
was waking up at 5 a.m. to do the chores, and this is a man that, when I think of my grandfather, my dad tells a story. You guys know what railroad ties are?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So my dad and his buddy would be helping them move around the farm. Be like, okay, grab a railroad tie, and they would share. They would each take a side and lift one, and they look over, and he's got one in each arm. He's a very strong guy with a serious work ethic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my grandmother had ailments as she was getting older. Like, we weren't so surprised that she got as sick as she did, but he was in, as far as we can tell, close to perfect health. And then 2 weeks later, he just stopped taking care of himself. He got weaker. He it was hard.
Yeah,
Wow.
but you don't pass in 2 weeks from not taking care of yourself.
No,
He
no, you can go
truly
a long
died of a
time
broken heart.
without bread and water. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and he truly died of a broken heart. And
yeah,
then Chad did his grandfather's service as well, and on that was one of the most touching services that I've in my heart, being able to do both of them 2 weeks apart,
Mm,
and just with what a wonderful family, and his testimony was amazing.
mm.
So
yeah. Praise God. That was a tough time for me. I had just given up. I was about to start a career with the Windsor Police, and I had turned away the opportunity, which is its own story, just a God story. I was doing MMA, and I had a wild thing happen in my gym with my coaches, and I ended up. It was like God was speaking to me and saying, "Don't take this path. I want you to think about counseling people and caring for people in a counseling setting." And I ended up on a whim, almost switching my trajectory to going to Moody Theological Seminary in Plymouth, Michigan, for my master's in clinical psychology, which is a 2 to 5 year program, and it required me to drive 4 nights a week away from my family in Amherstburg to cross the border and go to school. And it was within the first, I believe, 6 months of my education there. So I'm working full time at Community Living as a support worker. I had been there since I was 18. And so I'm working full time. My second child, Ezra, was on his way. I had just stopped training MMA and kind of, because I didn't have time anymore. I went to school full time. And it was within the first 6 months of that program. And that was a heavy program. They asked me to do clinical early because they were short interns. And so I learned through the fire. And they had a clinic, an outpatient clinic right on campus that we trained at. And it was within 6 months of that my grandparents passed. And it was, keep in mind, I wasn't a pastor. I wasn't formally trained at all to be a pastor. My grandma always spoke that over me. She said, "You're going to do that one day." But I had gone to teachers college. I was about to become a police officer. And then I switched gears and I ended up going back to school to become a therapist. And so even at that point, pastoring was not on my mind at all.
Wow.
But they saw it fit. The family asked me to do it, and so I was obedient. But it was probably one of the hardest times in my life.
Wow.
mm,
Yeah,
Wow.
and that's why I'm so grateful that Daniel was there for one of the hardest times in my life. Because and I'm not the only one. That's what you guys do on a regular basis. You're there for people in their most vulnerable, difficult, stressful times, and grief is huge. And so that's a tough life to live.
yeah. Yeah. How
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
do you get to deal with a lot of grievers in your type of counseling? What you do now?
Yeah, because I do everything: anxiety, depression, addictions, marriage,
Wow.
family issues, spiritual formation. So I run a private practice. I see 15 people a week. Margot and I have discerned that that's my cap. When I start getting moody and irritable, I gotta stick to my boundaries. So I do that in my private practice right here out of my home, and then
Okay.
I pastor at Heritage Park Alliance full time. And a lot of my role there is doing pastoral care or informal therapy with people. And so it's pretty much the same job. It's caring for people and walking them through their difficulty and helping them untangle the dysfunction in their lives and seeing what Jesus Christ has to say about these things and informs everything. And so it's a lot.
Wow. That's incredible. Like what a multi-dynamic twists and turns. And you're a young man.
Yeah, I'm 37.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're a young man. That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. I
Uh,
look old. I feel old, but I'm young.
that's good. Yeah.
That's what the birth certificate says, anyway.
Well, it's funny. We don't need to get into my story. I went off to school to work in full-time vocational ministry. And so I would say, I went to school to be a pastor, and I came out a funeral director.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
long story, but it's been, I realized that was the plan for me, kind of thing. And all the sense of serving
yeah,
and entering into people's lives briefly,
yeah.
because we always need to be honest with the public that most people don't want to meet us too often.
Sure. Yeah,
Like for you to meet Daniel twice in the month there, as their
yeah.
story goes.
Not common.
Thankfully, Daniel's
Hmm.
an awesome guy and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Not that other funeral directors aren't, but
right.
we often we'll spend a few days with a family, a
Yeah,
week. We're doing all these things, and at the end, we often will say, well, people will say to us, "Look, this has been so helpful, but I hope I never see you again."
yeah,
And we know what they mean. It still
yeah,
hurts,
yeah.
but yeah, it's I think the pastoral impulse for in our world is kind of innate. It's kind of baked in there, where if we're really listening, really doing our job, we're entering into their pain for a little while too, like
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
professionally.
It's the helping profession. Whether you're a pastor, social worker, funeral director, you're helping. You're the light when people are in a dark place, and you're kind of holding them up and sharing, going through their grief with them. And if they're asking you, which doesn't happen a lot because it's a bit of a blur, but if they ask
Yes.
you for specific things, like my grandfather did with Daniel, put him
Yeah.
on the spot with some good theological questions.
Yeah.
You got to be ready to shine that light and give an account for why you believe what you believe, and
Yeah.
that's a sacred thing to do with people. It's a wonderful, wonderful ministry.
For
Yeah.
sure. For
Now,
sure.
I'm gonna kind of direct this. We have a something that we're kind of interested in talking about a little bit
Sure.
now. Chad, in the pastoral setting, have you had to do any funeral services lately? Like, or do you do them often?
So I can answer the last part easier. No, I don't do them often. I probably in the 3 years I've been in formal ministry. So just so people know, I went to school and then I got hired as a teacher in a Christian high school, private high school, and I served as a high school teacher and guidance counselor. And then I was simultaneously running my private practice, which I still do today as a registered psychotherapist. But it wasn't until 3.5 years ago I formally entered the pastorate and became licensed with the Christian and Missionary Alliance of Canada. And so in those 3.5 years, my grandparents had been the only funerals I had done up until that point.
Hmm.
I've probably done about five
Okay.
five
Now,
funerals. Yeah, and the most
yeah.
recent was about a month ago.
Okay. Now, generally, like different settings have different feels and they look different as far as funerals go. James
Sure.
and I, we do many services. And one thing that we do is a little bit different. We encourage people that we serve on a regular basis that might be a little bit different than people are used to in a traditional funeral home. And if I was, I guess, now here with Life Transitions, I probably would have been able to encourage families a little bit differently in the past. But what that is doing the visitation and funeral service all right at that person's church if they're
Mhm.
connected into a church.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
does that make you feel as a pastor?
There's something about having roots and having a place to call home. And even at the breakfast you guys recently spoke at my church with our men, a lot of them are getting up there in age, and so they were listening closely. And I wasn't surprised to hear a lot of the feedback was, I didn't know that we could be
Mm,
have this business because it's business that needs to be attended to
right.
Yeah.
and taken care of. And it's if you can plan it ahead of time, I think even better.
Hmm.
And I, like anybody else, I want to be, I'm a new dog owner. And so Margot and I swore we would never get indoor pets. I grew up on a farm, and animals mean something different. You know what I mean? And we don't have them in our home. That was a foreign concept to me. But my kids are begging, can we have especially my youngest, Noah, he wants to be a vet. Can we have a puppy? And my dad breeds wiener dogs. I don't know the official name of those things, but they're cute. The little wiener dogs, the short fur. And so we got one for Christmas. And
Wow.
I was just thinking, a lot of times people will bring their dog at the end of its life to a vet. And it's this, to me, it's always weird. And I know that this might offend some people, but they'll pay this large sum of money, and they surround the pet in a clinical setting. And it's like, man, I would, this is a little harsh, but again, I grew up on a farm. I'd rather take my dog out for a walk and go take care of it there where we're together and he doesn't know the difference. And so my dad offers that as a service. Actually, I'll take your dog out for you one last walk, and we can do it any way you want, and you don't have to do it in a clinical setting. But for me, that's what I want. I want to be home. I want to be near the ones I loved. And for me, the church is my, in the deepest sense of the word, that's the family. That's the big family. And so to be able to have that there where I served, blood, sweat, and tears, that's a big part of my identity, a big part of my life. There are people, our church at Heritage just celebrated 96 years of ministry in Windsor, Essex. Right. God has been good to the Heritage Park Alliance Church. It's moved geographical location over the years, but there, I think of the Boycott family. He was there at the men's breakfast. We're talking, he's been there since he was a little boy, and we're talking about 90 years old. And so that family, of course, would Heritage Park represents so much of who they are and what God's done in their lives. And so what a blessing. I would imagine everybody who has a place they call home as far as a local assembly, I would imagine if you ask them, I'd be curious what the data shows. I would say most of the majority would probably say that's where I want everything done.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%, Chad. And what an excellent analogy. Never thought about that with pets, and people understand the whole pet world now more than ever, I guess, that you take your pet to a place that has really no connection.
It's always been odd to me.
No connection to the dog. Right. It's artificial. It's third party, blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
it's not what I would want.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what we're talking about makes perfect sense for church-connected people. A lot of folks are not church-connected, or they're kind of fringe kind of thing. But church-connected people, and I think I said this before we were on live here, that we've been trying to sort of educate people this way, like use your building where your baptisms are, your weddings are, your anniversaries are, your funeral, everything should be there. And many times we'll be at a visitation at someone's home church, and I see the lights go on. The members are coming to visit, and they're going, "Oh, I get it. We just use our church." Like, yeah, all you need is an undertaking company to help with the stuff you don't know how to do. But everything is done at your building, and it seems it's honorable. And like you said, it's home. It's home, and
I think that's the task of you guys in the future, is to educate us, because I'm a pastor and I'm a therapist, and I've conducted funerals. And up until I learned about this a few weeks ago from you guys, I didn't know it was an option.
Well, to anyone who's listening, I think it's a fantastic option. Maybe, I guess, to James and I, it just makes sense because we're in the industry. And but it's interesting. Even different cultures have different traditions, like the old order Mennonites, maybe Amish people, they're doing it in their home. And that's something we do too, by the way. If someone wants a visitation in their home, and people who want it in the church, and now even if they're not church connected, it can still happen at the church, like we were talking about in the office earlier. Graduations, right? They gather at churches to do big graduations and stuff. In
Heritage Park just hosted Maranatha Christian Academy elementary and high school graduation.
Awesome. Because so many times our modern church buildings have all the things that you need: space and flush toilets and roofs and parking lots and all that kind of stuff. And then you bless the church there. But Chad, you've totally blown my mind here, thinking we have not done the job maybe we could have done. We need to amp it up to remind more people that this is not only an option. We're really just kind of turning the hands of time back a little bit, where we're all of us. I'm the oldest one here, but we're all too young to remember when most of the stuff was always done at the church and at the house and at the cemetery. There was no intermediate third party funeral home building. And nothing wrong with them at all. But if there's not a need to add another piece of the story, don't bother. And we need to.
I really just think it's ignorance, and we need education.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I could talk with the both of you for hours, and I kind of want to. Let's make
I
this.
charge double after 30 minutes.
Yeah, well, watch the time, man. Oh man, our budget can't
James,
handle it.
I didn't know we were paying him.
Yeah. We've got like two different stories here. This is awesome. You're right, Daniel. Part of this is I said to Chad that Chad is very interesting. We're moderately interesting, but none of us are Joe Rogan. So we keep these fairly bite-sized pieces, and we know that you're a busy guy. I don't know what number of where on the 15 you are this week. So
I'm at the end of my day. As soon as I'm done here, I'm getting in my swimming shorts and swimming with my boys.
Okay,
All right.
yeah. Well, we're
Don't
keeping
get
you from
struck
that
by
now.
lightning. I think it might still be
We
storming.
might have some fun. We'll wait till Mom calls us in.
Yeah, it's in
And
God's
don't
hands
stress her out. Chad. Don't
You're
stress
right.
her
You're
out.
right. I got to be careful.
Listen,
All right. Thanks, brother.
Guys,
Appreciate it.
God bless you all you're doing. And I look forward to the day Windsor Essex when this becomes more mainstream. And I do think it'll take off.
Yeah, right.
And at least myself, this is what I want to connect with. I'm going to lay it all out with Margot as part of the will. And I want to connect with you guys to make sure that I at least get to be buried in my home church with my family around and in my roots, place that matters to me.
Yeah, hopefully both of us will be long retired by that time, but
Yeah.
we'll look after the arrangements. And you don't have to be old to make your pre-arrangements.
That's true. That's true.
Sure. Well,
All right, brothers.
I love you guys. God bless. Thank you for having me on here. What an honor.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.
See ya.
See ya.